Ethan thought he was alone on the trail, until he heard heavy footsteps behind him. When he turned, she was there. A mother bear, close enough that he could see the breath rising from her muzzle in the cold air. And she was following his trail. The mountains were quiet that morning, the kind of quiet that feels alive. Every breath of air carried pine, damp earth, and something ancient. Ethan adjusted the straps of his pack and kept walking, boots pressing into the soft trail. He liked hiking alone. Out here there were no voices, no phones, no deadlines, just the steady rhythm of his steps and the wind whispering between the trees. Then he heard it. A second rhythm. Heavy. Measured. Not the shuffle of leaves or the crack of a squirrel. It was weight, something large moving just out of sight. He froze mid-step. The sound stopped too. His throat tightened. Slowly, he turned his head toward the line of spruce trees behind him. At first he saw nothing. Then movement, a shadow separating from the shade, the slow rise of fur against the light. A bear. She was huge but not charging. Standing still, head lowered slightly, nostrils flaring. Ethan's heart hammered so loud he could feel it in his fingertips. He knew the rules. Don't run, don't make direct eye contact, speak softly. He took one step back and whispered, "Easy girl, easy." Behind her, a smaller shape appeared, a cub tumbling through the brush before steadying itself beside her leg. Ethan's fear deepened into awe. He'd heard stories of hikers mauled when they came between a mother and her cub. Now he was living that distance, about 30 feet of fragile space where a single wrong move could rewrite everything. She didn't growl, didn't rear, just watched. Ethan slowly raised his hands to show he meant no harm. The bear's ears flicked. She huffed, a deep, throaty sound, not aggression but warning. The cub mimicked the sound in a tiny echo. Ethan began backing down the trail, keeping his eyes low. The bear moved forward a few steps, then stopped. When he paused, she paused. He realized she wasn't chasing him, she was following the same path. The sun climbed higher, spilling gold through the trees. Every so often Ethan glanced back. The bear was still there, the cub trotting beside her, small head bobbing with each step. Hours seemed to pass like minutes. His fear turned into an uneasy rhythm of coexistence. They moved at the same pace, him leading, her behind. When he crossed a small stream, he stopped at the far bank, breathless. She reached it moments later, sniffed the stones, then guided her cub across with surprising gentleness. For a second, their eyes met across the water. There was no sound, just the current moving between them. Ethan exhaled. Maybe she was just using the same trail. Maybe he wasn't part of her story at all. He started walking again, slower now, careful not to surprise her. But every few minutes, he'd hear that soft rhythm behind him, steady, deliberate, impossible to ignore. By the time dusk began to tint the peaks with lavender light, he found himself whispering again, "Guess we're traveling together, huh?" The wind shifted, carrying the faint scent of rain. The bear raised her head suddenly, sniffing the air. Ethan stopped too, following her gaze toward the horizon. Dark clouds were rolling over the ridge fast. The forest around them seemed to hold its breath. Thunder rumbled far away, and the mother bear began walking faster, straight toward him. The first raindrops hit the pine needles like tiny whispers before the storm broke open. Ethan pulled his hood over his head and adjusted the straps of his pack. The air had turned sharp, damp, and cold. He looked back. The bear and her cub were closer now, their fur darkened by rain. Lightning cracked somewhere behind the ridge. The sound rolled through the valley, deep and endless. The bear flinched, then let out a low moan, not of anger but of unease. Ethan froze, realizing she was just as wary of the storm as he was. The trail narrowed between wet boulders. Water streamed down their surfaces, creating small rivulets that merged into a fast-moving creek below. Ethan moved carefully, boots slipping on the slick rock. The bear stayed back, pacing slowly, her cub clinging close to her leg. When thunder rolled again, louder this time, the cub yelped and stumbled. Ethan couldn't help himself. He turned, instinctively stepping forward as if to help. The mother bear reared slightly, a sharp warning in her eyes. Ethan stopped mid-step, raising both hands. "It's okay," he whispered, the rain dripping from his face. I'm not hurting anyone. The bear's chest heaved, nostrils flaring. Then she lowered herself back down, checking her cub. The little one whimpered, pressing into her fur for warmth. Ethan stayed where he was, heart pounding, until he realized the storm was worsening. The temperature dropped fast. Mist thickened. He could barely see 5 meters ahead. His map was soaked through and the trail markings were fading. He needed shelter. And judging by the bear's pace, she did too. He spotted it first, a shallow rock alcove under a jutting cliff. Just enough space to stay dry. Ethan hesitated. Could he stay there, with them? He glanced back. The mother bear was watching the same spot. Her ears flicked. She seemed to decide first, nudging her cub toward the alcove. Ethan sighed, then slowly followed, keeping a respectful distance. He ducked inside from one side while the bear settled on the opposite edge. The rain pounded the forest outside, drowning every other sound. For several minutes, there was only the rhythm of rain and breathing, his and hers. The cub looked curious now, tilting its head as if trying to understand the strange creature sharing their shelter. Ethan smiled faintly, whispering, "Hey, little one." The cub blinked. Then, in a clumsy motion, it sat down, almost mirroring him. Ethan laughed quietly under his breath. The absurdity of it, the beauty of it. He wasn't sure if it was the exhaustion or the rain, but the moment felt fragile, almost sacred. The mother bear shifted slightly, watching him. Her gaze wasn't threatening anymore, just aware. Protective. Ethan pulled an energy bar from his pocket, breaking it in half. He placed a small piece near the edge of his space and pushed it forward with a stick. The bear didn't move at first. Then the cub crept closer, sniffed it, and nudged it toward its mother. She sniffed too, then left it untouched, turning her head slightly away as if to say, "We don't need your food." Ethan smiled again, quietly respecting the message. The storm went on for hours. Time stretched. The forest grew darker. At one point, lightning flashed through the trees, illuminating them all, man, bear, and cub, breathing together under the same shelter of rock. When the thunder finally began to fade, the bear rose and shook the water from her fur. The cub mimicked her, sending droplets flying across the cave. Ethan stood too, slinging his pack over his shoulder. For a brief second they looked at each other again, not as intruder and animal, but as travelers who'd survived the same storm. Then she turned and lumbered back onto the trail, her cub following closely behind. Ethan waited a few seconds before stepping out after them. They were already ahead, two shapes moving through the mist, silent and steady. He didn't know where they were going. But somehow his feet started following the same path again. The storm had cleared, but on the next turn Ethan saw fresh paw prints, and something else beside them, boot prints. Someone else was out there. Ethan crouched near the muddy trail, his heart still steadying from the storm. Fresh paw prints pressed deep into the soft ground, the mother bear and her cub heading north. But beside them, a second trail of boot prints followed. Human. Heavy tread. Fresh. He frowned, brushing his fingers over the edges. Whoever it was, they'd come after the storm, maybe an hour ago at most. The pattern was uneven, like the person was rushing. He stood up, scanning the mist ahead. The forest was still dripping, the pines whispering as water fell from branch to branch. Ethan's instincts tightened. Bears avoided humans, but another human tracking a bear? That was rarely good news. He adjusted his backpack and started walking faster, careful not to make too much noise. The trail curved around a slope where moss-covered stones jutted out like teeth. The air smelled of wet earth and pine sap. A faint metallic sound broke through the quiet, a click, followed by something shifting. Ethan froze. He recognized that sound. A rifle bolt. His pulse spiked. He crouched low, moving carefully toward a cluster of fallen logs. Through a narrow gap, he saw him, a man in a green jacket, standing near a tree line holding a hunting rifle. His boots were caked in mud. The man scanned the clearing below, where the bear and her cub were moving cautiously, unaware they were being watched. Ethan's stomach turned cold. Hunting season hadn't even started in this zone. And a mother with a cub? It wasn't legal anywhere near here. He stepped out before he could second-guess himself. "Hey." His voice echoed across the trees. The man spun around, startled. Ethan raised both hands. "You shouldn't be here, that's a protected area." The hunter squinted at him, his expression unreadable. "And who the hell are you?" "Just a hiker," Ethan said. "Those bears aren't bothering anyone. Leave them alone." The man gave a short, humorless laugh. "You think you own the forest?" He slung the rifle casually over his shoulder and started walking toward Ethan. Ethan's throat tightened. The distance between them was shrinking. "I'm serious," he said. "Put it down. There's no reason to shoot." The hunter's eyes flicked past him, toward the trail where the cub was visible for a second before disappearing into brush. "That cub's been coming close to the fishing trail," the man said. "People talk. I handle problems like that." Ethan stepped closer, anger boiling through his chest. "They're not a problem. You're the problem." For a tense moment, neither spoke. Only the rain dripping from leaves filled the silence. Then, from somewhere behind them, a deep growl rolled through the forest. Both men turned. The mother bear had stopped halfway up the ridge, her head low, eyes fixed on them. She'd seen the man. And she'd heard Ethan's voice. The hunter swore under his breath, raising his rifle halfway. "Don't," Ethan said quickly, stepping in front of him. "She's warning you. Back away." "Move," the man snapped. But Ethan didn't. He held his ground, feeling the heat of his heartbeat pounding in his neck. The bear's growl deepened. She stepped closer, protective but not yet charging. Ethan slowly extended his hand out to the side, keeping his voice calm. "Go," he said to the hunter. "Walk back slowly." The man hesitated, then took a step back, then another. Ethan stayed between them, until the bear lowered her head again and turned back toward her cub. For a few seconds there was stillness. Then the hunter muttered something, low, bitter, and retreated down the trail. Ethan waited until he was gone before exhaling. He looked toward the ridge, but the bears were already gone, silent, blending back into the wet trees. Only the soft prints in the mud remained. He crouched beside them, tracing the edges again, whispering, "You're safe. For now." He didn't realize until later that something shiny lay half buried near the paw prints, a spent rifle casing, still warm from the man's earlier shot. And when he picked it up, he noticed the casing wasn't alone. 2 more glinted under the moss. Someone had fired earlier. But who had they been aiming at? The bear, or someone else? Ethan turned the brass casing over in his palm. It was still warm, slick with rain, but the edges were clean, freshly fired, maybe within the last few hours. He looked around again, scanning the undergrowth. No other sounds except the slow dripping of water from the pines. Someone had fired up here recently. But he hadn't heard the shot. That realization hit him harder than he expected. The storm, the thunder, the wind, it had masked the sound. Whoever it was could have fired when the lightning struck and no one would have noticed. Ethan's pulse quickened. The hunter he'd just seen might not have been alone. He pocketed the casing and followed the trail upward, careful not to make noise. His boots sank slightly in wet moss. The smell of pine and mud filled the air. Every few steps he stopped and listened, for the rustle of branches, the crack of a twig, the sound of something large moving. The forest felt different now. Not peaceful. Wash. Half a mile later he spotted another clue, a torn piece of fabric caught on a bramble, olive green, the same shade as the hunter's jacket. But beside it was something else, a shallow depression in the mud, circular and wide. A bear had stood there. And drops of blood, thin, diluted by rain, led deeper into the trees. Ethan's chest tightened. "No," he whispered. "Please no." He followed the trail of blood, each step heavier than the last. His thoughts raced. Had the hunter hit the bear before he arrived? Was she wounded, still trying to protect her cub? The forest grew denser, darker. The canopy overhead blocked most of the light. His breath came faster, fogging the cold air. Finally, the trail led to a narrow clearing at the base of a fallen cedar. There she was. The mother bear was lying against the trunk, her chest rising and falling unevenly. The cub circled her, whining softly, confused and scared. Ethan dropped his pack and knelt at the edge of the clearing, not daring to move closer. Her fur was matted with rain and blood, a dark patch along her shoulder. It didn't look deep, maybe a graze, but it had bled enough to weaken her. She raised her head weakly when she sensed him. Their eyes met, not with hostility but weariness. Ethan spoke softly, barely a whisper. "You'll be okay. I'm not here to hurt you." He didn't know what he was going to do. He wasn't a ranger, he wasn't armed, he didn't even have first aid beyond a small emergency kit. But leaving her like this felt impossible. The cub whimpered and pressed against its mother's side. The bear gave a low rumble, a sound somewhere between pain and comfort. Ethan slowly unzipped his pack. He tore his extra shirt into strips, dipping them in his canteen. When he inched forward, the cub backed away, growling faintly. He stopped, holding still. "It's okay," he said again. "Just trying to help." The bear didn't move. Her breathing was shallow but steady. Ethan reached out carefully, his hand trembling, and pressed the damp cloth gently against the wound to clean it. She flinched, growling low but didn't strike. "Good girl," he murmured. "You're strong." He worked slowly, rinsing away the blood and mud. The wound wasn't fatal. The bullet had grazed the outer muscle, painful but not deep. He felt a strange relief flood through him, followed by anger, not at her but at the man who'd fired. The forest seemed to breathe again as the rain lightened. Mist curled around them like smoke. When Ethan finally stepped back, the bear watched him, alert but calmer. The cub crept forward again, nuzzling her fur. Ethan whispered, "You're safe now. Just, don't move too much." He sat against a nearby log, exhausted, water dripping from his hair. For a long time none of them moved. The forest hummed quietly around them. Then a new sound broke the calm, the distant crack of a branch under heavy boots. Ethan froze. The hunter wasn't gone. Cliffhanger, a dark figure was approaching through the mist, rifle in hand and this time moving fast. The sound of boots crunching through the wet undergrowth grew louder. Ethan's pulse surged. He turned his head toward the tree-line, eyes narrowing through the mist. The shadowy figure was closer now, the same man in the green jacket, rifle slung low, face hardened. Ethan stood quickly, putting himself between the hunter and the bears. "Don't," he said, voice low but firm. "She's injured, but she's not a threat." The hunter stopped about 20 feet away, studying the scene, the wounded mother bear, the cub pressed to her side, and Ethan standing soaked and defiant in the middle of it all. "Move," the man said flatly. "You don't understand what you're doing." Ethan shook his head. "I understand exactly what I'm doing. You fired that shot, didn't you?" The hunter didn't answer. He just adjusted his grip on the rifle. "I found your casings," Ethan continued. "You hit her once, barely. You could have killed her." "Why?" The hunter's eyes flicked toward the bear. His jaw tightened. "That bear came too close to a fishing camp last month. Rangers won't do anything until someone gets hurt. I'm just saving them the trouble." Ethan's breath came fast, cold mist clouding his words. "You're not saving anyone. You're finishing a mistake." The hunter sighed, tired, as if explaining to a child. "You spend enough years out here, you stop pretending nature cares about your feelings. I've seen what a hungry bear does when it's desperate. And I've seen what people do when they're scared," Ethan shot back. For a moment they just stared at each other, two men on opposite sides of the same wilderness. The rain had stopped, but water still dripped from the trees, each drop echoing in the silence between them. Behind Ethan, the bear gave a low rumble. Her eyes flicked between them, body tense but not aggressive, as if she understood the standoff. Ethan took a small step back toward her, trying to show the hunter that she wasn't charging. "Look at her," he said softly. "She's hurt. She's trying to protect her cub, that's all." The man's finger brushed the trigger guard. Ethan's stomach twisted. He raised both hands slowly. "You shoot her now, you'll be shooting through me." The hunter's eyes hardened. "You think you can stop me?" "No," Ethan said. "But maybe I can make you think twice before pulling that trigger." The wind shifted. A faint groan of old trees filled the forest, long, low, and eerie. Something changed in the hunter's face just slightly. Doubt. The cub gave a small cry, pressing closer to its mother. The sound pierced the stillness. Ethan saw it land like a blow. The hunter's grip loosened just a little. He lowered the rifle a few inches. His voice came quieter this time. "You don't get it. Once they lose their fear of people, it's over. They keep coming back. Next time, maybe it's a kid at a campsite instead of you." Ethan stepped forward, cautiously. "Then teach people to respect the forest. Don't destroy it for being wild." The hunter looked away, toward the trees, toward nothing. His breath came in long, heavy clouds. Finally, he exhaled sharply and swung the rifle off his shoulder. For a second, Ethan thought he was about to raise it again. But instead, the man ejected the remaining round, letting it drop into the mud. He muttered, "If she shows up near people again, it's on you." Then he turned and started back down the slope, disappearing into the mist the same way he'd come. Ethan stood still for a long time, barely breathing, until the forest swallowed the last echo of boots on wet ground. Only then did he look back at the bear. She was watching him, calm now, as if sensing the danger had passed. He sat down again, exhausted, letting the silence return. The cub yawned and nestled against its mother. Ethan whispered, "We're not enemies. We never were." He didn't notice the faint radio crackle coming from the hunter's direction, somewhere beyond the trees, or the distant voice that answered, "Copy that. Move in. Let's find him." The hunter wasn't alone after all. Others were coming, and they were tracking Ethan now. The forest had fallen silent again, except for the occasional drip of water from the treetops. Ethan sat still, hands resting on his knees, trying to slow his heartbeat. The mother bear's breathing had steadied, her wound clotted enough to stop bleeding. The cub was half asleep now, tucked against her belly. For a fleeting moment there was peace. Then a distant hum. Faint at first, then clearer, the static crackle of a two-way radio followed by the squelch of a reply. Ethan's eyes widened. The hunter hadn't just left, he'd called someone. He stood slowly, straining his ears. The voices were faint, distorted by distance and echo. He caught fragments between bursts of static. North Ridge, injured bear, keep eyes on the hiker. He froze. On the hiker. Ethan's stomach dropped. They weren't only after the bear. He grabbed his pack and looked toward the slope where the hunter had disappeared. The trail was muddy but clear, fresh prints led downhill. He thought about running the opposite direction, deeper into the forest. But that would mean leaving her, the bear he'd just helped, the cub that trusted him enough not to flee. He looked back at them, uncertain. The mother lifted her head slightly as if sensing his unease. Her eyes followed him, calm but watchful. Looks like we both have company, Ethan whispered. He made a quick decision. He'd lead whoever was coming away from them. Give them time to rest. He grabbed his map, tore off a strip of cloth from his sleeve, and tied it around a branch a few meters away, just in case he needed to find his way back. Then he began to move. The mist thickened again as he descended through the pines. Every sound seemed amplified, branches creaking, boots squelching, breath fogging in the cold. After 10 minutes he spotted movement through the fog. 2 figures dressed in dark ranger green jackets, carrying rifles and radios. They weren't the same hunter. These men were professionals. One of them raised a hand when he saw Ethan. Hey, you, stop right there. Ethan froze halfway down the slope, heart hammering. The second ranger moved to flank him. What's your name? One called. Ethan Reed, he said cautiously. I'm a hiker. I was just. Where's the injured bear? Ethan hesitated. She's deeper in the valley. She's wounded but stable. The men exchanged a look. One spoke into his radio. Copy that. Contact confirmed. Hiker located. Proceeding. Ethan frowned. Wait, how did you know I was here? The first ranger looked uneasy. We got a call about an illegal discharge in this zone. The man who contacted us said a hiker interfered with a bear control operation. Ethan's stomach turned. Control operation? You mean he was hunting her illegally? That's not what the report says. Ethan took a step forward, frustration breaking through his caution. That bear did nothing wrong. She's injured because of him. He fired first. The second ranger raised a hand, palm out. Sir, calm down. We'll verify everything. But Ethan could see it in their faces. They didn't fully believe him. To them, he was just another stranger in a closed wilderness area. He exhaled sharply. You'll never find her if you don't know the terrain. Let me show you where she is. Please. She's got a cub. If she dies, it dies too. The rangers hesitated. One finally nodded. Fine. But you stay in sight. Ethan turned and led the way back up through the mist. The trail was steep and slick, but he knew the path by heart now. When they reached the fallen cedar clearing, the air felt strangely still. The bear and cub were gone. Ethan blinked, scanning the shadows. Only wet moss and flattened grass remained where they'd been lying. She was right here, he said. She must have moved when she heard us coming. One ranger bent to examine the ground. Fresh tracks. Heading west. The other lifted his radio. We've got movement. Bear still active. Ethan stepped between them. She's moving because she's scared. Don't go after her, she's injured. The ranger's reply was calm, professional. Sir, please step aside. Ethan stood his ground. You don't understand? A rustle cut through the argument, a low growl from the ridge above. They all turned at once. Through the mist, the mother bear stood on a rock ledge, her cub behind her, both outlined against the pale light. She wasn't running anymore. She was watching. One ranger lifted his rifle, not to aim but on instinct. Ethan shouted, Don't you dare. The bear's low growl echoed through the valley, and this time she wasn't warning the rangers. She was warning Ethan. Something else was moving behind him. Ethan spun around, pulse thundering in his ears. The growl from the bear echoed again, sharper this time, not at the rangers, not at him, but behind them. Something moved in the fog, a dark, shifting shape lower on the trail. The rangers turned their flashlights toward the movement. For a moment, all Ethan could hear was rain striking leaves, water dripping from moss and the faint hum of the radios. Then a voice broke the silence, a man's voice. "Put those lights down," the voice snapped. Out of the mist stepped the hunter from before, the same one who had fired at the bear. His jacket was torn, one sleeve soaked in mud, but his grip on the rifle was steady. Ethan's breath caught. "You." The hunter's eyes flicked to him, then to the rangers. "That bear should have been put down hours ago," he said coldly. "You let her live, and now she's a threat to everyone who comes through this valley." The first ranger spoke cautiously, hand near his radio. "Sir, lower your weapon. We'll handle it from here." "She's not your problem anymore," the hunter said, stepping closer. "You don't understand what she's done." Ethan's voice rose. "She hasn't done anything. You shot her for sport." The hunter ignored him. His eyes darted toward the ridge where the bear still stood, unmoving. The cub peeked from behind her leg, its small head tilting curiously toward the humans. Ethan took a step forward, desperate. "If you shoot, she'll charge. You'll kill her or she'll kill you. No one wins." For a tense moment, no one moved. The forest held its breath. Then, without warning, the hunter swung his rifle toward the ridge. The crack of the shot tore through the fog. The bear roared, a deep, thunderous sound that rolled across the valley. She reared up, towering over the ridge line, and then dropped down into the undergrowth, charging. "Get down," the ranger yelled, pulling Ethan to the ground. The other ranger stepped in front, rifle raised but not firing, shouting into his radio for backup. Branches snapped, leaves flew. The bear's massive form surged through the brush, powerful despite her wound. She stopped just short of the group, only 10 feet away, growling, head low, protecting the cub that now whimpered behind her. The hunter stumbled backward, tripped over a root and fell hard. His rifle skidded into the mud. Ethan scrambled to his feet, hands raised. "Stop. Everyone stop. She's only defending her cub." The bear's breathing was ragged, sides heaving, but she didn't advance. The rangers, to their credit, held their fire. Seconds stretched into an eternity. The fog swirled between them, human and animal locked in a silent standoff of fear and instinct. Finally, the mother bear huffed loudly as if making a decision. She nudged the cub toward the opposite slope. The little one obeyed, scrambling over rocks and vanishing into the mist. Then, with one last lingering glance at Ethan, the mother turned and followed, disappearing into the trees. Only the echo of her retreating steps remained. The first ranger exhaled slowly, lowering his rifle. That could have gone bad fast. Ethan looked down at the hunter, who sat in the mud, breathing hard. His eyes were wide, not with fear but realization. He had seen what the others now knew. The bear hadn't attacked, she had protected. The ranger walked over, retrieving the hunter's weapon. "You're done for today. You fired inside a restricted zone." The hunter didn't resist. He just stared into the fog where the bear had gone. Ethan crouched nearby, catching his breath. His hands were trembling, from adrenaline, relief, and something else. A strange, quiet respect. He turned to the ranger. "She's heading west, toward the old watershed trail. If you go after her, give her space. She won't bother anyone if she's left alone." The ranger nodded. "We'll log her path, monitor from a distance. No one's shooting anything." Ethan gave a small nod, eyes still on the mist. Somewhere out there, the bear was leading her cub to safety. For the first time all day, the forest felt calm again, not because danger was gone, but because balance had been restored. Ethan glanced up at the ridge where she'd stood. Quietly, almost to himself, he whispered, "Go on, Mama. You earned your peace. Useful. We'll flag her area as a no-hunt zone for the rest of the season." Outside, thunder rolled faintly over the hills. Ethan stared at the wet ground, tracing patterns with his boot. She wasn't aggressive, not even when he fired. She just wanted her cub safe. You could see it in her eyes. The younger ranger, still on the phone, turned. "HQ says we're clear to classify it as a non-threatening encounter. That hunter, though, he'll face charges for discharging a firearm near protected wildlife." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Good. Maybe it'll make others think twice." The lead ranger shut his notebook. "You heading back to town tonight?" Ethan hesitated. He thought of the bear disappearing into the fog, her cub following close. "No," he said finally. "Not yet. I want to make sure they crossed the ridge safely." The ranger raised an eyebrow. "That's a long hike." Ethan smiled faintly. "I've got the time." That evening the storm cleared. A soft orange light bled through the clouds, staining the treetops gold. Ethan walked the ridge trail again, this time slower, deliberate. Every sound, Every rustle, every drip of water, seemed alive with meaning. He found the muddy prints near the old watershed stream. Big ones, then smaller ones pressed into the soft ground. The mother bear's tracks led toward the west, away from the danger into untouched wilderness. Ethan crouched and touched the largest print. His fingers sank slightly into the cool earth. "You made it," he whispered. He stood there for a long time watching the forest breathe. The silence wasn't empty, it was earned. Behind him, the last light faded, and the first stars began to appear between drifting clouds. The next morning Ethan met the rangers again at the base trailhead. They looked tired but lighter. "HQ got your report," the lead ranger said. "They'll issue an advisory to local hikers. Give the area a wide berth until she relocates deeper into the valley." Ethan nodded. "That's all she needs. Space." The ranger glanced at him. "Most people who see a bear that close never want to go near one again. But you." Ethan smiled, eyes distant. "I think she taught me something." The ranger chuckled. "What's that?" "That we're guests out here. And good guests don't overstay." They shook hands, quiet understanding passing between them. Then Ethan turned back toward the mountains, the same trail he'd first shared with her. The air was clean. The forest was calm. He started walking again, boots crunching softly over gravel, eyes scanning the horizon where the sun broke through the trees. And for the first time in days he didn't feel like he was walking alone. Winter came early that year. The valley transformed under a silent blanket of snow, and the trails Ethan once hiked turned to narrow, frozen paths where even the smallest sound carried for miles. The river had slowed to a glassy crawl, reflecting the skeletal trees and the white breath of the mountains. Ethan hadn't planned on coming back before spring, but fate, or something quieter, had other plans. He was working with the Park Service now, helping survey wildlife movements for the coming season. It wasn't glamorous work, long hikes, cold mornings, camera traps that froze in the night, but for Ethan it felt right. He was giving back to the place that had changed him. One morning, while checking a trail camera near the same ridge where he'd last seen the mother bear, something stopped him cold. Fresh tracks. He knelt, brushing snow from the prints. They were deep, clean, and unmistakably large, and beside them, smaller prints half their size, light but steady. His breath clouded the air as a smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "You made it through the winter," he murmured. He followed the tracks for several meters, careful not to disturb the trail. They led toward the old stream bed, the same place where the cub had first played months ago. The prints circled near a patch of flattened snow where something heavy had rested. He crouched there, tracing the shape with his glove. It was warm once. Recent. Then he heard it, a sound so soft it almost vanished into the wind. A low, rhythmic huffing. Ethan froze, scanning the trees. For a moment, nothing. Then, from behind a snow-dusted pine, she appeared, the mother bear. Her fur looked thicker now, glistening with frost. The scar on her shoulder was faint but visible. And beside her, standing tall and healthy, was the cub, no longer small, its coat darker, eyes bright with curiosity. Ethan's heart stuttered. He hadn't expected this. She didn't seem afraid. She watched him calmly, chest rising and falling in deep, measured breaths. Her cub sniffed the air, pawing at a snow mound. Ethan slowly lowered himself to one knee, avoiding direct eye contact. "You remember me?" he whispered. A faint rumble came from her throat, not a growl but something deeper, almost like acknowledgement. For a long time they simply existed in the same silence, man and bear, bound by the same piece of wild earth that had tested them both. Then the cub moved closer. Only a few steps, but enough to make Ethan's pulse quicken. Its small black nose lifted, catching his scent. Ethan stayed perfectly still. The mother bear watched but didn't move. She trusted the space between them. The cub tilted its head, then, in an oddly playful motion, pawed the snow, sending a puff of white dust into the air. Ethan couldn't help but smile. "Still curious, huh?" For a moment he thought of taking out his camera, capturing this impossible reunion. But then he stopped. Some moments he realized weren't meant to be captured, they were meant to be kept. He watched as the cub bounded back toward its mother. The bear gave one slow blink, almost a nod, and then turned, padding into the trees. Ethan remained kneeling, snow soaking through his jeans, heart heavy with something both joyful and solemn. He whispered into the quiet, "Stay safe out there." The forest swallowed his words, carrying them like wind over the ridge. He stood, brushed the snow from his hands and looked at the trail where they had gone. The prints were already fading beneath fresh flakes, fleeting proof of something real, something few would ever believe. But Ethan didn't need proof. He had seen her again. That was enough. That evening he returned to the ranger cabin, cheeks flushed from cold. The younger ranger was brewing coffee when Ethan walked in. "Find anything interesting?" the ranger asked. Ethan smiled faintly. "Yeah," he said. "Just a reminder that some stories don't end, they just keep walking beside you." The ranger looked puzzled, but Ethan didn't explain. He didn't need to. Outside, the snow fell thicker, erasing footprints and trails, everything except memory. Spring came back to the mountains like a deep breath, melting snow, trickling streams, and the quiet hum of new life stirring beneath the thaw. Ethan stood on the ridge again, where the trail curved toward the valley, camera slung across his shoulder, boots wet with morning dew. He hadn't returned to find her. Not really. He had come back because something about this place felt unfinished, not in the sense of danger but in gratitude. The forest was louder now. Jays called from the treetops, and the wind carried the scent of damp bark and moss. The memory of winter's silence still lingered, but it was fading, replaced by the pulse of renewal. Ethan reached the overlook where he and the rangers had once watched the fog roll over the valley. He paused, scanning the tree line below. Nothing. Just the forest, vast, indifferent, alive. He smiled. That's how it should be. Later that afternoon he stopped by the ranger station to deliver some of the new survey footage. The lead ranger looked up from his desk as Ethan entered. "You've been out there since dawn?" Ethan nodded, dropping a small stack of SD cards on the counter. "Trail cams are all up. Got a few elk, some wolves, even a moose near the East Bend." The ranger flipped one of the cards between his fingers. "And the bear?" Ethan shook his head. "No sign. But that's okay. It means she moved deeper into the range, away from people. Probably found safer ground." The ranger smiled knowingly. "You sound relieved." "I am," Ethan said softly. "Sometimes not seeing something means everything's as it should be." That evening he sat outside his cabin on the porch steps, a mug of coffee warming his hands. The forest beyond was bathed in soft amber light. He thought about the first day he'd seen her, that massive shape on the trail, the cub peeking from behind her legs, the way fear had slowly turned to understanding. He remembered how she'd spared him, how she'd chosen to walk away instead of fight. And then the winter day she'd returned. It felt less like coincidence now and more like permission, a reminder that coexistence wasn't just possible, it was sacred. He reached for his camera and flipped through the photos he'd taken over the months. Mountains, rivers, storms, sunrises, all of them fragments of the same truth. The wild doesn't belong to us, we belong to it. As dusk deepened, a rustle caught his ear. He turned, half expecting a squirrel or a deer, but then he froze. At the edge of the clearing, between two birch trees, stood a shape he recognized instantly. The bear. Her coat shimmered in the fading light, thick and golden brown. The scar on her shoulder gleamed faintly as she moved. And beside her, no longer small, no longer fragile, was the cub, now nearly her size. Ethan's breath caught. He didn't move. She stood watching him for several seconds, unmoving, silent. The cub sniffed the air, huffed softly, then pawed at the ground. Ethan slowly placed his mug down, stood up, and gave a small nod. "You're safe here," he whispered. The mother bear blinked once, then turned. Together, they slipped back into the forest, shadows fading into gold. Ethan didn't follow. He didn't need to. He watched the spot where they disappeared until the last light drained from the trees. Then he sat back down, a slow smile spreading across his face. The forest was quiet again, not empty but whole. Sometimes the wild tests us not to see our strength, but to see if we remember our place in it. I shared a trail once with a bear. She taught me what respect really means. If you ever meet one, don't just see danger. See the story of survival that's been running longer than ours. He looked up at the stars through the tree canopy, the same stars that had watched over both of them that first night in the rain. And for the first time in years, Ethan felt at home. If this story moved you, share it. Because sometimes, a single moment of understanding can protect a lifetime of wilderness.